When the issue of whether or not it's okay to punch a Nazi first came up, it struck a chord with me, and I decided I wanted to address it. Apparently, it struck a chord with a lot of people, so by the time this comes out, it'll be old news. But I want to go over it anyway, partly because there's some import in the issue, but also because when I reached the conclusion that I did, which, spoiler alert, is with one caveat, yes, punch away, I was a bit unprepared for what my own reasoning was. It's important to examine one's own beliefs beyond I think it, therefore it's correct, and you might be surprised what you find. I know I certainly was. Now, this topic burst onto the scene on the day of Trump's inauguration when someone punched noted white supremacist Richard Spencer in the head and then ran off. The incident led to some widespread discussion on the ethics of this, with one side taking the position that this was assault and we should support neither violence nor criminal activity, and the other side taking the position that he's a goddamn Nazi who literally advocates for genocide, so why on earth would anyone defend him? Now, I'm firmly on the side that is all for hitting him and feels that it's a shame that it doesn't happen to him more often. I and others who've taken this position have been asked about it, why we would support it, is it only because the word Nazi is involved, and so on. And yes, the word Nazi has some part of it, although it's far less the word than what it accurately represents about Spencer and people like him. Now, just for some background, Richard Spencer created the website AlternativeRight.com and edited it until 2012, and is generally given credit for coining the term alt-right, which has become the media-friendly term for racists, which alt-right people dispute. So let's take a quick peek. There was an article that was brought to my attention by a Facebook post which attributed this quote to him, although the article gives writing credit to Colin Liddell, so unless they're the same person, Spencer didn't actually write this. He just created a platform on which people could express and spread these ideas, which I would argue is not appreciably better. Now, here is a quote from the article on Alternative Right. This article is titled, "Is Black Genocide Right?" And here at the beginning of the article, the first paragraph says, "Instead of asking how we can make reparations for slavery, colonialism, and apartheid, or how we can equalize academic scores and incomes, we should instead be asking questions like, does human civilization actually need the black race? Is black genocide right? And if it is, what would be the best and easiest way to dispose of them? With starting points like this, wisdom is sure to flourish, enlightenment to dawn." The article also contains the following quotes. "The white race is history's victor. We conquered Africa and the Africans on the sheer merit of the superiority of our race, culture, and society. Although there are doubtless many South African blacks who behave in ways that we could call decent, we have to wonder how much of this is real and not affected when savagery of the worst possible kind seems to lurk under the surface and in even the most banal of situations. The basic habits, ideas, and practices that help civilization to survive and prosper in other parts of the world seem largely absent among large elements of South Africa's black population, and it seems that it is only a matter of time before the country sinks to the level of poverty and savagery endemic in most of the rest of Africa and places like Haiti and Detroit." So this is the sort of sentiment that Richard Spencer has created a website to give voice to. Now, I did some peeking around on Colin Liddell after seeing this, and he appears to have taken over as editor of their site, at least shown by a Reddit here called Colin Liddell, editor of Alternative Right, which sounds pretty definitive to me. Now, he might not be the editor anymore because the site currently lists Richard Spencer as the American editor and incidentally claims that the site was founded on January 16th, 2017, even though Wikipedia puts it 5 years earlier in March 2012. And the article that I just quoted was on the site well before January 16th, 2017. Now, here's some things that Colin Liddell said in the Reddit thread. Asked about his views on white men marrying Asian women, his response included, "If you are attracted to Asian women, you are essentially attracted to childlike, boyish women with chubby faces who love their daddy." He stated, "My take on Trump is not fixed. One ironic thing is that he is actually America's first post-racial president, not Obama, who was a racist so-and-so." And he stated, I actually think it's actually a bit cruel to create mixed race kids. They often seem to suffer from toxic identity issues. Well, gee, I wonder why if you are looking at them as a mixed race kid rather than as a human being. He added, yes, white women, raise your game. Cats and purple armpits are no substitute for a nice white man. So this is a person who ran AlternateRight.com for a time, but he's not Richard Spencer. Just happens to share a lot of the same ideas as him, and Spencer is happy to give him this platform to say things like this. Other facts about Spencer. Spencer was with the American Conservative, but he was fired because his views were considered too extreme. He now rejects modern American conservatism. He says that its adherents, and this is a direct quote, can't or won't represent explicitly white interests. He's the president and director of the National Policy Institute, a white nationalist, white supremacist think tank whose previous president, Lewis Andrews, stated, I want to see the Republican Party destroyed so it can be reborn as a party representing the interests of white people, not entrenched corporate elites. In 2016 NPA conference, Spencer railed against Jews and with a smile quoted Nazi propaganda in the original German. That's from Wikipedia. He also finished his speech by yelling, Hail Trump, hail our people, hail victory, because of course he supported Donald Trump, go figure. And audience members responded by standing up and making the Nazi salute. 2 years earlier, in 2014, Spencer was deported from Budapest, Hungary, and is banned from 26 countries in Europe for 3 years after trying to organize a conference for white nationalists there. Ladies and gentlemen, you're alt-right. If you can look at that and state that that's not racist, don't even talk to me. You are so far removed from basic human decency that to engage in reasoned debate with you is a waste of time. So this is Richard Spencer, the man who got punched in the head on the day Trump was inaugurated. And people are standing up for him. This racist Nazi, this advocate for white supremacy, this man who quotes Nazi propaganda in German. This is a man people are lining up to defend, stating violence is never the answer, or freedom of speech, or some similar nonsense. The idea that we should avoid violence in general is good, but the idea that we should avoid violence at all costs is bad. As a people, we certainly love our gun violence, our overseas drone strike violence, and so on. But we as a people are faced with violence in various ways on a regular basis, and sometimes violence is the correct response to it, more so than the refrain that I've heard enough to be completely sick of, the refrain of trust the system. Because at its core, this issue is about fear. Fear of others, fear of people who are different, fear that we're on our own because the system will never provide justice. Fear, admittedly the majority of it in America, misguided fear, drives us as individuals and as a society far more than we care to admit. And this is in large part because American society has largely turned the concept of responsibility on its head. Even though we generally say the right things, when it comes to actual practice, we are a country that protects the bully and vilifies the victim. And it starts right at the beginning. In the earliest years of school, the kids who mouth off and are verbally abusive generally get away with it, while the people who are the target of it are taught to be the bigger person and not let it bother them. Just ignore them and they'll go away. Only they don't go away because no one ever adequately addresses their problem behavior. And so they learn that it's okay. It's the responsibility of the victim if they get hurt, not the responsibility of the bully who was hurting them in the first place. So they become more aggressive, more empowered, more willing to attack others because as bullies they never face consequence for it. And by the time we reach adulthood, we find we live in a world where we exist in constant fear of these bullies. And this bullying ends up manifesting itself in a lot of the problems that we see in society today with the racism and sexism and so on. I was channel surfing one time when I came to a news channel where LeVar Burton, probably best known for Roots, Reading Rainbow, and Star Trek The Next Generation, was part of a discussion, and he said how he handles traffic stops and how he has taught his son to handle traffic stop. Hands and views outside the car before the police even approach, no sudden moves, make sure there's no reason for the cop to shoot you. If you're black, You have to have a prepared procedure for what to do to survive a traffic stop. White people don't have to worry about that. I don't. It wouldn't even occur to me to have one in advance. At best, my procedure is don't be a dick and everything will be fine. That's it. But if a person is black, they can die without getting violent or even without doing anything wrong. Selling cigarettes, get strangled to death. Get pulled over for a brake light out, get shot. Be a 13-year-old playing in a park, have the police roll up and shoot you before you can say a word. And even with all of it on video, in far too many cases, a police officer ends up not even facing charges, the lesson being that killing a black person isn't even a crime. Now, if that was my reality, I would sure as hell fear cops. And of course it's not all cops, but it's enough, and the clear message is that it's up to the people getting shot, the victims, to find a way to avoid it, not the responsibility of the people doing the shooting to not freaking shoot them, or children, or nonviolent offenders. Black people are the victims, but they bear the burden of proof against their aggressors. Here's another one. You ask a group of men what they do to potentially protect themselves if a stranger is approaching them when they're walking home at night, and there's not much response. You ask a group of women the same thing. Start looking for brightly lit or populated areas, look for escape routes, prepare your keys as a weapon. The list goes on. Women have a prepared procedure for walking home. They have to worry if they're in public and let the drink out of their sight for 5 seconds. They have to worry about a lot of things that I would never even consider. And why do they have to do that? Well, a two-word example. Brock Turner. Here's a man who raped an unconscious woman behind a dumpster because he decided that was a thing that he should do. He got caught. He got sentenced to 6 months, suspended after 3, and people who had never met anyone involved in this were worried about how it would impact his swimming career and attacked his victim for the consequences he had to face for committing his crime. And there's, in situations like this, the accusations and the excuses that she had been drinking, she dressed a certain way, she acted a certain way, she invited it. Because really, what are you supposed to do when a woman passes out or wears a shirt with a collar that's low? Not rape her? Again, the message is that it's up to the women getting attacked, getting raped, the victims, to find a way to avoid it, not the responsibility of the men committing the assaults and rapes to simply not do that. Women are the victims, but they bear the burden of proof against their aggressors. And this goes on, and the result is black people live in fear. Women live in fear. Other people, Muslims, transsexuals, people who are seen as different in any way, they live in fear. They know society is stacked against them regardless of whatever equality may or may not be written into the law for them. But some fear is more accepted than other fear, and what we seem to be okay with is the fear felt by white males. And because we kowtow to these fears and ignore others, see, this is where I reach the point of surprise with my own reasoning. To advocate for violence against a group of people, to advocate for Nazi punching, is to concede that there's no other way to protect ourselves from them, which is to state that the system, the police, the courts, the lawmakers, and so on, are not able to provide justice and will never be able to do so as things are currently set up. Now, that may sound obvious to many, but I suppose it never hit me that bluntly before, and I certainly don't mean it in an anti-government, libertarian 5-year-old way. I mean, I'd seen the injustices. I'd seen people get away with things they shouldn't while others were punished recklessly disproportionate to the severity of their offense. But I always had the sense that the system worked well overall. It wasn't perfect, but generally it worked. But then Brock Turner happened, and as I was pondering that, and I found myself wondering, if a woman is getting attacked, if someone is attempting rape, wouldn't she be better off doing everything in her power to injure or kill him on the spot? And I seriously wondered that, because the rapist has very little fear of the criminal justice system. Most rapes go unreported. Most of the ones that are reported never go to trial. Most of the ones that do go to trial don't result in convictions. A rapist acts with little or no fear of consequence, even if he is caught. He's not afraid, certainly not the way his victim is on a daily basis. In fact, a rape victim generally has more to be afraid of going through the criminal justice process than the rapist does. And with the rise of our new white supremacist president and his cadre of advisor Nazis now running the system, there's no reason for anyone to have faith that the system is going to improve anytime soon. I've come to the point where I don't trust it. Not at all. It's a total crapshoot. Being rich and white and male all work in your favor, but really you could still potentially go to jail if the state needs more prisoners to meet a contractual requirement for a for-profit prison's occupancy requirement. I'm a middle-class, middle-aged white male, and regardless of what I may do, regardless of actual guilt, the thought of being in the criminal justice system scares me. I'm afraid of it, just on general principles. And when all this was sinking in, as I thought about the whole Richard Spencer getting punched in the head issue, I had the moment where I thought, am I, at age 40, just now approaching the point that black people in this country start at? With regards to police, with regards to the courts, with regards to prison, this is where they start? Because I know I will never understand what life in this country is like for a black person. I can intellectually grasp it, I can empathize, but I don't believe that I can ever truly understand it. But if this is a starting point, and they spend their lives, they spend a lifetime experiencing the things that got me to this point, things that I've only read about, that they've experienced, I don't know that I have words. I can only give credit for unbelievable patience and putting up with our pulling bullshit for this long without rebellion, without violent rebellion, because I don't even know what to say. Yeah, I'm still trying to work through this on my own, but yeah, this is reality for people. This is where they spend their entire lives. Yeah, I don't even know what to say about it. But now I try to bring all of this back to the issue of Nazi punching. Is punching a Nazi illegal? Yes. Strictly speaking, it's assault. Is punching a Nazi wrong? I'm not sure I'm willing to go that far. See, ideally, laws and courts should reflect what is right and wrong. That's the goal, but there will never be a one-to-one perfect relationship between what is right and what is legal. Technically, yes, punching a Nazi is assault. But technically, Martin Luther King was a criminal who knowingly broke laws to address and to draw attention to social issues. Legal and illegal do not always correlate to right and wrong. Now, that's definitely not to say that if you punch a Nazi, you're the equivalent of MLK. It's not. But just because you're doing something illegal doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong. Because think about women who have to be afraid every time they tell a man no, or go online and stand up for women's rights. Think about black people who have to fear for their lives every time they see a police officer get pulled over while driving. Think about Muslims who have to fear for their safety in public simply because of what they wear on their heads. Think about transsexuals who have to worry about being beaten or killed because they have to use a public restroom. And then ask yourself, why are non-whites and non-Christians and non-males living and acting in fear while a loud vocal minority of white supremacists act and behave with total impunity? Why should anyone be okay with these bastards advocating for the deaths of millions of people and making others live in fear simply because of who they are? Why are bullies allowed to terrorize others while the majority has to live in fear of them? Why is promoting genocide and mass death okay, but hitting the person promoting that not okay? And why has this been mainstreamed into acceptability? Why is this a status quo? I mean, when Trump won the election, KKK members celebrated on highway overpasses, swastikas were spray painted on buildings, high school students walked through school halls holding up a Trump pen sign while shouting white power. They are not afraid. Trump's election makes them feel they've been legitimized and vindicated. So I say the goal is to make them fair again. The Nazis, the white supremacists, the racists, the rapists. Richard Spencer got hit in the head once and started talking about paying for security to protect him. Well, Good, he got hit once and he's afraid he's going to get a hit again. He's been emphatically introduced to the reality of words and deeds having consequences, and he is afraid of it happening again. And that is a good thing. Should we feel sympathy for a person who calls for ethnic cleansing just because somebody hit him in the head? I say no. Now, again, it's assault legally. There can be legal consequences, and you need to be aware of that and be willing to face those consequences. That is a criminal history there, potentially. But that said, if you're aware of that, I see nothing wrong with punching Nazis or white supremacists or anyone who advocates for horrific ideas that dehumanize other people. The more it happens, the more afraid they'll be of bragging about these ideas. The less they'll be willing to promote them publicly, the less influence that they'll have. And the more other people will be willing to stand up against them, stand up for themselves and against this sort of bigotry. There's a lot more of us than there are of them. We have the morality and even the basic human decency that they lack on our side. There's no reason that we should be afraid of them. We have the numbers, we're right, and we deserve to be safer than the people who threaten us. So, make Nazis fear again. Make racists fear again. Make rapists fear again. Make white supremacists fear again. Make them fear that when they say other people should die, it will put their own safety at risk. Make them fear that every time they start sharing their toxic ideals, they risk getting punched in the teeth. Make them fear that by expressing these horrific ideals, they are endangering themselves, because those ideals endanger the rest of us. Make Nazis fear again. It's the least they deserve.